The discovery of the first Halo ring, Installation 04, was a moment of huge significance for both humanity and the Covenant. For humanity, it meant learning of their place in the galaxy as reclaimers of the mantle of responsibility, the Flood, and the ring's purpose to stop them. For the Covenant, it was the place that could begin their so-called Great Journey. But it was also their failure to stop the destruction of Installation 04 that would be the catalyst of the Great Schism that would weaken the Covenant from within, which ultimately led to its fall. But the Battle of Installation 04 did not come without great sacrifice. Neither did the Battle of Installation 05 and the Ark. The Pillar of Autumn escaped the planet of Reach with a complement of 1,000 naval staff and crew, as well as 600 Marines, 400 ODSTs, and 2 Spartans. Although one of the Spartans, Linda 058, was critically injured and remained in cryosleep, with a hope that she could be revived at a later date. Nearly all members of the Pillar of Autumn would perish on Alpha Halo. There was at one point hope for the Marines and ODSTs led by Major Antonio Silva and Lieutenant Melissa McKay, who upon learning of Cortana and Master Chief's plan to destroy the Halo ring, mounted a successful assault on the Truth and Reconciliation, where they hoped to use the ship to escape the Halo ring and return to Earth. With the ship in human control, it began its descent, but the Flood had not been completely sterilized from the vessel. The infected, but still partially conscious, Private Jenkins attempted to warn Melissa and the rest of the troops of the Flood stowed away within the vents and tight compartments of the ship. Melissa realised that if even one Flood specimen escaped containment, it could result in Earth and humanity's demise. She severed a vital power line within the ship, sending the Truth and Reconciliation plummeting to the surface of Alpha Halo, killing all humans on board and preventing any chance of the Flood returning to Earth. While Cortana notes that herself and the Master Chief were the only survivors of the Battle of Installation 04, a short while after their escape they would learn of a precious few other humans that survived Alpha Halo's destruction. Scans revealed 3 cryotubes, one containing Spartan Linda 058, and a nearby Pelican that joined the Chief's longsword, revealing 4 survivors: ODST Corporal Locklear, Warrant Officer Sheila Pulaski, only Lieutenant Elias Havison, and Sergeant Avery Johnson. Though most of the survivors' luck would run out before and during Operation First Strike, a group of Sangheli aboard the captured Covenant ship Ascendant Justice damaged the power conduit. While repairs were being undertaken, Sheila, along with 2 Spartans rescued from Reach, Anton 044 and Lee 008, were killed by a stray plasma bolt from an enemy Covenant ship. Saddened with the death of Sheila, ODST Locklear planted a C7 explosive on a Forerunner crystal found beneath Castle Base on Reach. However, Locklear was unaware how brilliant the explosion would be, and the cover he elected to hide behind was not sufficient enough to protect him from the detonation, which killed him. Only Lieutenant Elias Havison would meet his end on the giant Covenant battle station, unyielding Hierophant, when himself, along with Vice Admiral Danforth Whitcomb, lured hundreds of Covenant ships towards the doomed Covenant battle station that was destroyed in a huge explosion, taking nearly every Covenant ship in the area with it. In part due to Havison's sacrifice, the invasion of Earth was delayed and significantly weakened. With these losses, the only survivors of Alpha Halo that returned to Earth were Sergeant Johnson and Master Chief. Following the initial stages of the Battle of Earth, the UNSC frigate in Amber Clad pursued the Prophet of Regret's assault carrier to Delta Halo, where the Battle of Installation 05 would begin. The in Amber Clad was a smaller, lighter ship than the specifically modified Pillar of Autumn, and with it carried a complement of 250 naval staff and crew, 200 Marines, 64 ODSTs, and the Master Chief. After deploying to the surface of Delta Halo, Chief, several ODSTs and Marines made their way to a temple where the Prophet of Regret was enacting a sermon. Though most of the troops were recalled to assist Miranda and Johnson's assault on the library, 2 Marines accompanied Chief on his mission to assassinate the Prophet of Regret, though unfortunately, even if they had survived the skirmish with Regret and his honour guards, they would have been killed by subsequent glassing from one of Truth's ships. The Marines that went with Miranda and Johnson would also meet a similar ill fate, where many of their forces were cut down by the Flood that were released when the containment shield was dropped. Though despite the odds, a few Marines made it to the Index Chamber. Unfortunately, most of these surviving Marines were either killed or captured by the Covenant, who soon arrived and snatched the Index from Miranda and Johnson. The soldiers and crew that stayed behind on the Amber Clad lacked the numbers to defend the ship from the flood that infected the crew, who would later be used as an invasion force against High Charity. While aboard High Charity, the Master Chief rescued several Marines from holding cells, but all of these Marines were later killed in action, either by the Covenant or later by the Flood.
My blessing, the brutes now lead our fleets. They ask for your allegiance, and you shall give it.
Truth, we'll need to take a shortcut, straight through the mausoleum. Look on the bright side. For now, they seem much more interested in killing each other.
Despite nearly losing the ship's entire forces to the Covenant and the Flood, a few lucky survivors would live thanks to the timely arrival of the Sangheili-led assault on the crew's captors. Seizing the moment, Johnson formed a fragile alliance with the Arbiter in order to stop Tartarus from activating the ring. With the Arbiter's help in transportation, Sergeant Johnson, Miranda Keyes, Sergeant Stacker and Sergeant Banks would all return to Earth and live to fight another day. After the Master Chief returned to Earth, the Prophet of Truth opened the portal to the Ark, where he was pursued by a joint UNSC and Sangheili task force. The UNSC, having to defend Earth from any potential further Covenant or Flood attacks, could only commit 2 ships to the task force, the Foward Unto Dawn and the Aegis Fate. While the number of souls aboard the Aegis Fate is unknown, the Foward Unto Dawn carried a crew of 782 members, made up of naval staff, Marines, ODSTs, and the Master Chief. The UNSC ships were ill-equipped to face such a large vessels of Truth's fleet. Instead, they were used to deploy ground forces for operations across the Ark's surface. Light casualties were taken, but the UNSC with the help of the Sangheili were able to destroy the Covenant fleet and ground forces that protected Truth. Though the brutes were able to capture Sergeant Johnson in his attempt to deactivate a Forerunner barrier protecting the Citadel. Realising that with Johnson captured, Truth would be able to activate the Halo Rings, Miranda Keyes flew a Pelican into the Citadel, killing several brutes. However, when Johnson told her to pull the trigger on herself and Johnson, she hesitated and was shot dead by the Prophet of Truth. Master Chief and the Arbiter arrived soon after and were able to kill Truth and stop the rings from being activated, but there was still the issue of the Flood that had to be dealt with. Though such a mission would only be undertaken by the Master Chief, the Arbiter and Sergeant Johnson, where the latter, Spartan 1, would be killed by 343 Guilty Spark. While the Foward Unto Dawn was split in half by the Ark Portal, the Arbiter was able to return to Earth, as was the Sangheili carrier Shadow of Intent, along with the UNSC frigate Aegis Fate, as well as the majority of the human forces sent to the Ark. However, all this time there was one elusive Marine who was present during the battles of Installation 04, 05, and the Ark. His methods of survival are to this day unknown. The Marine's name is Chips Dubo, and he was last seen firing a volley of shots during the Void Memorial Ceremony. And that concludes this lore video on the survivors of the original Halo trilogy. Thank you for tuning in. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and keep in the loop with more Halo content by hitting the bell icon and subscribing. And until next time, Spartans, this is Josh, signing out.